bridge there outside the court. Let's get more on what this is like and things around it with defence lawyer and advocate KC Thomas Ross. Hello, Tommy Ross.
Hi, John.
Sorry, Thomas. Your reaction to this then? When it comes to sentencing, first of all, there's no full life term, is there? But is there something similar that we do?
Well, we do impose a life sentence in respect of anybody who's convicted of murder, and then the judge has to specify a period before which the accused is unable to apply for parole. We don't have the power, our judges don't have the power to impose a whole life term, but obviously if somebody was in their 50s and a sentence of 35 years was imposed, then probably it would have the same effect.
She didn't appear for sentencing. Is that unusual? Can that happen here?
It's extremely unusual. I have never seen it happen in Scotland. I'm not saying that it never has, but usually it makes sense for the accused to appear and not to be disruptive, because at the point of sentencing, most accused want to make a good impression with the judge so far as they're able to. And although I've never seen it in Scotland, it appears to happen in England in cases where the accused is already resigned to the fact that he or she will never be released from prison, and therefore it's simply impossible to make things any worse.
Why do you think she didn't appear? Do you ever discuss it? I presume you haven't discussed it with clients, but would you ever discuss this with a client?
Well, it makes sense for clients to appear, so most of them have made that decision for themselves without any need for me to advise them. I suspect that she's ashamed of what she did. She was anticipating that it would be a very hostile atmosphere in the court, and it must be difficult. What she did was a terrible thing, so to face the parents who she's caused so much distress for must be quite a daunting prospect. And when she has the option simply of staying in the cells in the knowledge that probably in practical terms it won't make things any worse, then you can see why that's quite an attractive option.
Can you give me a glimpse into the court when these kinds of cases are there? We probably haven't had any cases like a nurse, murdering lots of little babies, but when it is children, tiny little babies, and there's an accused and there are parents and there's a defence and there's a prosecution, describe that to me.
Well, it's an extremely tense atmosphere, and the most surprising thing about it is that, generally speaking, the people who have suffered most behave themselves impeccably. You can feel the tension, you can feel the hatred towards the accused, but very seldom does anybody shout or cause a disturbance in the court. So it's a peculiar atmosphere, because you can imagine if it happened outside the court, then there would be a substantial danger of something more serious happening. But generally speaking, the families of the deceased come to court and behave incredibly respectfully towards the court, while not disguising their dislike of the accused.
As a KC, what would it be like for someone to defend her?
Well, it would be extremely challenging. It would be extremely upsetting. And, I think that people probably don't imagine how difficult it is for the various people who work in court to listen to that type of evidence. Now, we've been pretty well paid for being there, but also there's quite a large group of support staff in the form of the dock escorts, the clerk of court, the various macers and people who help with the productions, and they have to sit and listen to this awful evidence without any substantial financial benefit for doing it. And, it is interesting, the dock escorts are probably the worst paid out of the entire group of people who will be in court. And the government proposals in England seem to be suggesting that the people who are worst paid and have to listen to the terrible evidence without any real reward also have to wrestle with the accused and somehow drag them up from the cells into court. Now, that doesn't seem to me a very sensible suggestion.
Can I ask you a tangential question? Do you think people were swayed at all by the way the defendant looked, her appearance?
I think it's possible, and jurors are only human. They are directed that they must consider the case only on the basis of the evidence, but they're not robots. So, I don't know very much about the way she presented, but you certainly do have a concern when the accused, for example, is extremely aggressive towards the prosecutor or, appears to be disrespectful towards the judge. As a defence counsel, you always have the concern, well, how's this going with the jury? They might just have turned against them by this stage, and it's going to make the job all the harder.
I just want to ask you a couple of questions. I know you're busy, but do you think that her non-appearance could have an effect on Scots? Scottish people who are thinking, I don't want to appear. I don't want to be in court. There's nothing to force the accused, is there, to go and listen to their sentencing?
Well, it's quite a select group, John, because the only people who would make such a crazy decision would be people who had absolutely nothing to lose by winding the judge up, which happily, even in Scotland, is quite a small group. Usually you're in there arguing for a punishment part of 17 rather than 18 or 18 rather than 20. And, you're not helping matters when your counsel's done all that preparatory work to try and keep the sentence down if you then refuse to go up into court. So I don't think many people will be affected by it, but I can't rule out the fact that there's somebody who's going to appear in the knowledge they'll never be released from prison. And I have represented a few who have been in that position, and I suppose some of them might say, well, if you can do it in England, I'm doing it here. I can guarantee you this, nobody would be in the slightest put out by it in Scotland. The judge would just go ahead and sentence in the absence, and we'd all just go on with it.
Do you think she'll be in danger in prison?
I don't, because, there is quite there'll be quite a number of actions against the Home Office, against the Scottish Prison Service, for negligence in relation to people who were injured in prison and, effectively blaming them for breaching their duty of care. And, they know they have to protect the prisoners from any possibility of physical violence, because if they don't, quite apart from any moral imperative, they could be sued for a lack of care. So I don't, but, that for all the things I've said, people are harmed in prison. And, so equally, it's impossible to rule it out.
All right, Thomas, thank you. Casey, Thomas Ross. Drive time. Now,